Tonight on The Readout.
The time for impeachment is the time when there's evidence linking President Biden, if there's evidence linking President Biden to a high crime or misdemeanor. That doesn't exist right now.
Even conservative Congressman Ken Buck knows it's ridiculous that Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene are pushing to impeach President Biden before even establishing the smallest hint of wrongdoing. Also tonight, we're learning more about the Mar-a-Lago IT guy who could be a key witness for prosecutors in Trump's classified documents case. Plus, new reporting tonight on the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling and how Ginny Thomas, of all people, wife of Justice Clarence Thomas, and right-wing court whisperer Leonard Leo seem to have a jump start in exploiting that ruling. Good evening. I'm Jason Johnson in for Joy Reid, and we begin with the Republican-controlled House of Representatives returning to work this week for the first time since Donald Trump racked up 2 more criminal indictments. The now 4-time indicted former president facing 91 federal and state charges. But instead of focusing on the 11 legislative days Congress has to fund the government, Speaker McCarthy and Trump's allies in Congress are raring to go to serve his legal defense and his 2024 campaign. They're agitating to start an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden based on just vibes and energy, apparently, because there's no evidence whatsoever. McCarthy's real boss, Marjorie Taylor Greene, is leading the charge, saying she won't support any measure to fund the government until the House votes to begin an impeachment inquiry. But even right-wing Freedom Caucus member Kim Buck called Marge's timeline absurd because, and these are his words, evidence doesn't actually exist. Never mind that Buck is just one of numerous Republicans who have admitted out loud that there's no evidence and it's just political theater. The divide between the right wing and the further extra crispy right wing of the Republican caucus has McCarthy considering a devil's bargain. Horse trading an impeachment inquiry to the MAGA wing to avert a government shutdown. As Noah Berlansky points out, the fact that they're pushing for impeachment, even though they know it's bogus, is an indication that Republicans have become, quote, increasingly authoritarian and anti-democracy, and increasingly committed to undermining and mocking forms of democratic accountability. With McCarthy saying last month that impeachment is a natural step forward, Democrats aren't taking Republican threats lying down. The White House has mobilized a war room to combat the evidence-free push to impeach, and House Democrats have built a defense team to counter the Republican nonsense, especially House Oversight Chairman James Comer's investigations. The ranking Democrat on the Oversight Committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, has put out a memo calling Republican investigations a complete and total bust, an epic flop in the history of congressional investigations, and there's been a lot of floppish investigations. Adding that impeachment is a transparent effort to boost former President Trump's re-election prospects and distract from the overwhelming evidence of his criminal and corrupt conduct during his time in office. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Congressman Jared Moskowitz of Florida, a member of the House Oversight Committee, and former Republican Congressman David Jolly, who is no longer affiliated with that party. So, Congressman, I'm just going to start with this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she leads Kevin McCarthy around by the nose. We get that and understand it. Just from a practical, functional matter, how hard is it to set up an impeachment hearing? Like, this seems like a lot of legislative moving and shaking that would need to be done to even set this up, even though we know it's bogus to begin with.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who came out just the other day and said that she's recommending some states start seceding from the union. So, when she starts her new country, she can be in charge of impeachment in that new place. But it's fascinating, right? Right, Jason? We're watching Freedom Caucus members fight amongst themselves over Joe Biden impeachment. I mean, I didn't have that on my bingo card that Joe Biden's impeachment would be dividing the Republican Party, but it's exactly where the status of the House Republicans are right now. They have no direction. They don't know whether they want to fund the government. They don't know whether they want to impeach the president. And to be quite honest, I'm starting to feel bad for James Comer. These hearings have had, low T and, are just not connecting with the American people because they're just throwing darts at the board. And again, now you got Freedom Caucus members admitting no evidence on Joe Biden. I mean, that's the bumper sticker right there.
David, this is the other part that sort of gets me. And I thought Congressman Raskin's point was very clear that, some of this is research. It's mocking impeachment. The impeachment process is supposed to be for obvious high crimes and misdemeanors, things that are so blatant that the entire public knows or understands them, things that are so blatant that they attack the core, the absolute core of our democracy. The idea that Republicans basically want to do this because they just don't like Joe Biden, doesn't that sort of make a mockery of what an impeachment is supposed to be about anyway?
Yeah, Jason, I'm glad you framed it that way, because we are about to see the fitness of Speaker Kevin McCarthy put to test. We're about to see his personal mettle and integrity put to the test. We're about to see his ability to be a prudent custodian of the House put to the test. But this goes all the way back to the corrupt bargain that Kevin McCarthy made with Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of the others to become Speaker after 15 votes. And I believe the deal was struck then, in January. I don't think it's a deal in the works now. I think Kevin McCarthy, whether it was explicit or not, he knew they were going to have a debt ceiling raise that he was going to lose. Kevin tried to spin it like a win and say there were conservative victories, but the Freedom Caucus called his bluff and said, no, there aren't. So they're already smarting from the early summer debt limit increase. Now you're looking at the annual budget breaking down, funding the government September 30th. And here's why Kevin McCarthy will have to move forward with going after Joe Biden. There is not a budget that could pass just with House Republicans and get the support of Senate Republicans. This actually isn't about even compromising with Senate Democrats or Joe Biden. There is not a hard right conservative budget that could get 218 Republicans in the House that would get Mitch McConnell to vote for it, which leaves Kevin with saying, okay, the only way, whether we have a shutdown or not, the only way to keep the government funded is going to be with probably 175 Republicans and 100-plus Democrats and Joe Biden's signature. And then how does Kevin McCarthy remain Speaker after that? Likely to move forward with an impeachment that he agreed to last January.
Congressman Moskowitz, speaking of the Senate is obviously the second level, right? If you're going to do an impeachment, you have a vote, then you have the Senate to see if the person can be removed. I want to play you some sound by Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania about what he thinks of the idea being floated around amongst Republicans in the House as to what impeachment is, and get your thoughts on the other side.
Go ahead and do it. I dare you. If you can find the votes, go ahead, because, you're going to lose. Your man has, what, 3 or 4 indictments now, and you're going to, so like I said, sometimes you just got to call their bull.
Congressman, I think what Fetterman is also pointing out here is not only is it going to fail, but I don't think the country has an appetite for this. I mean, look, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that you could try and impeach the president because of Hunter Biden. I don't think you can try and impeach the president because he pulled the troops out of Afghanistan. Is it some of the failure of this, the idea that the American people heading into the 2024 election, this might be the last thing that they really care to pay attention to?
Well, unfortunately for the Republicans, the failure is that it's the truth. The truth is Joe Biden did nothing wrong. I mean, Senator Fetterman is right there, which is, they've been talking about it. They've spent all tens of millions of dollars, I'm sure, of taxpayer money running all these investigations that have proven nothing. And by the way, if the polling showed that the American people wanted Joe Biden impeached, okay, you can be sure Republicans would have launched this inquiry already. But as soon as these articles got filed, they buried them in committee. They buried them in Homeland Security. They didn't want to talk about it. You got Republican members, moderate members, Freedom Caucus members coming out trying to delay impeachment. That tells me they know this is not good for them if they want to hold on to the majority in the House. And so, it's fascinating to watch from a political science standpoint, but it's horrible if you're trying to keep the government open and get us funded so that, we can keep the economy going and make sure that the American people have a good place to work and good jobs and all of that jazz. I mean, this is what the House Republicans said that they were going to do when they got power. Oh, when you finally give us power, we're going to show you what we can do with the House. And meanwhile, they haven't passed a single piece of substantive legislation to help the American people, not like the infrastructure bill, not like the CHIPS and Science Act, not like the the Inflation Reduction Act, nothing. They don't have a single piece of legislation to stand on. And so now impeachment, which is what they fed their primary voters, they can't even deliver on that. But look, they sold themselves to Donald Trump. They want to do this. Donald Trump is demanding this, of course, because he wants to run against somebody else he can say is impeached. So it's equal on both sides. So, I look forward to James Comer and all these folks filling out an FEC form for an in-kind contribution to the Trump campaign, because that's all these hearings are. They're an extension of the campaign.
As a poli-sci professor at Morgan State, I love numbers. And I think the numbers, you make a good point, Congressman. I think the numbers on this also don't really play out in the Republicans' favor. There's a recent poll from the Public Policy Polling that found in 18 Republican-held districts won by Biden in 2020, 56% of voters think an impeachment inquiry would be more of a partisan political stunt, including 55% of independent voters, while only 41% think it would be more of a serious effort to investigate important problems. Look, David, you're not in office anymore. But if you hear those numbers, if you are a member of Congress in one of those districts, do you want leadership forcing you into this impeachment hearing heading into an election year?
Absolutely not. And here's the affirmation of that. The easier vote in this whole impeachment question is the vote to open an impeachment inquiry, right? That's just suggesting the House should go look at the facts. They don't even have the votes to open the inquiry. And they're jumping to an actual impeachment vote and doing a whip count there, and they're nowhere close to that. Kevin McCarthy very likely could lose the House if they pursue impeachment, and he knows that, because consider what would be put in front of the American people. Bad decisions in the personal life of Hunter Biden. We all know that. He's owned it. He wrote about it in a book. But they actually haven't even proven that Hunter Biden did anything illegal when it came to his representation or work with foreign clients. The Department of Justice didn't even find anything that Hunter Biden did that was illegal related to representing clients in front of the government, right? They brought up charges on a gun charge and on a tax charge, but not about his representation. So they haven't even made the son culpable for an illegal act, much less than tied it to the president. So do Republicans really want to spend the next year talking about the president's son and his personal failings, that frankly failings similar to probably those that have touched many American families? Or do they want to focus on bread and butter Republican issues, which you can still squabble with, from the border to taxes to the economy? I think Kevin McCarthy would rather focus on the latter. But as I said, this will be a test of his fitness, because I think ultimately he will cower to the far right to protect his own speakership.
Congressman, I want to make sure that we end on this, because I think it's key. Well, look, while the Republicans run the House, I do think it's always important that we focus on what Congress is actually doing. So on the Democratic side right now, even with McCarthy's leadership, even with Marjorie Taylor Greene basically, playing with his puppet strings, what are Democrats hoping to do with this new session that's come back? Obviously the debt ceiling, but there are other critical things on the Democratic agenda that you're trying to push for the remainder of this year.
Well, look, the first right off the bat is we got to keep the government open. Right. So Democrats are looking to fully fund the government. We're looking to fund, to continue to fund the Ukraine issue out with Russia to make sure that they have the weapons that they need. We're looking to fund FEMA. Right. The disaster recovery fund has run out of money. We got to make sure cities and counties have the money that they need, that reimbursement money, so that they can respond, recover, and rebuild after we have these disasters. We're looking at being the adults in the room and being responsible. And so, listen, I think the next 3 weeks are going to be fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see, as the Republicans tear each other apart, how the Democrats in the House, handle that. Also, obviously, we got the Senate. You got Republicans and Democrats in the Senate unified on a lot of the budget issues. And so you could see a showdown between the House and the Senate. For the last 9 months, Leader Jeffries has talked about how MAGA Republicans are leading us down this horrible path, and that we're going to be the responsible ones in the room. And I think that's what you're going to see from Democrats in September.
David Jolly, very quickly, Joe Biden, he's hearing that Republicans are trying to do this in the House. Vice President Harris, does he make a statement about it? Does he say, hey, bring it, come with it, pull up with your impeachment hearing because I know I'll beat it? Or is this something that the president says, hey, I'm above the fray, I'm going to keep moving heading into 2024, where whoever you guys put up against me, I'm going to beat him?
Stay above it. Focus on an economy that lifts all Americans, solving the problems for families at their kitchen table, protecting the constitutional order and constitutional norms that Donald Trump wants to shred. The contrast will be obvious to the American people.
Thank you, Congressman Jared Moskowitz. Really appreciate you joining the show this evening. And former Congressman David Jolly, one of my favorite people. Thank you for joining us on The ReidOut.